The first thing I heard was my own laugh, only it wasn't really mine. It came through the thin condo wall and the open Bluetooth speaker that had decided to betray me. "Play something romantic," Lila's voice said, sweet and casual, that half-teasing tone she used when she wanted to seem spontaneous. Then Kendra's, dripping with wine and gossip. "Does Ethan even know what that means anymore?" A pause, then laughter. My name hung there like a cheap ornament, fragile and fake, glittering for the wrong crowd. I was in the hallway testing an audio line for a broadcast, still wearing my headset. My phone had automatically paired with Lila's speaker in the living room next door. That's how I learned my marriage was rotting from the inside out, through Bluetooth lag and my own bad luck. More laughter. Bryce's voice joined the mix, that smooth, throat-scrubbed tone he used in his real estate videos. At least he tries, right? Some men don't even show up. Lila giggled. "Oh, he shows up? With a checklist?" The laughter hit like cold surf water around my ankles. I just stood there, half-lit by the hallway bulb, one hand pressed to the wall, listening. "After Labor Day," Lila said, quieter. "I'll tell him we're separating, mutual. I'll post something about growth and gratitude. People love that stuff." "Smart," Kendra said. "Image control," Bryce added. "You'll own the narrative." That word, narrative, was mine. I'd spent years editing sound so other people's stories came out clean, and now they were writing mine without me. I didn't throw the phone, didn't pound on the door. I hit record instead, screen capture, timestamp. Nothing illegal, just what my phone already did. My breath shook, but my hands were steady. I had proof, not of infidelity yet, but of something worse. Contempt. I sat in the stairwell and listened until they moved on to beach rentals. Then I walked to the pier where I worked maintenance nights and watched gulls tear at a bag of popcorn. The wind stank of salt and fryer oil. I told myself I'd wait and plan. No screaming match, no cops, no divorce papers she could turn into a brand moment. I'd build something slower. The gulls screamed and dove, scattering crumbs across the planks. The horizon throbbed with a low orange haze, and the sea looked like melted tin. My reflection in the water was thin, stretched, broken by the chop of the waves. I thought about the Bluetooth connection, how it had reached across walls like a ghost touching a live wire, how easily things connected when you didn't want them to, and how hard it was when you did. I leaned on the railing and tried to breathe through it. I told myself this was data, not disaster. I'd been collecting sound my whole life, radio static, creaking floorboards, the hiss between words. I knew that when you played back a recording enough times, you started to hear more than you remembered. The tremor in a voice, the hesitation before a lie. So I replayed it, again and again. Her laugh, their laughter, my name hanging there. Each time I heard new details, the clink of a wine glass, the soft thud of her heel against the floor, the low hum of the refrigerator. Everyday sounds that now felt radioactive. Every second became evidence. When the pier lights flickered on, I pulled my jacket tighter and thought about how I'd gotten here. The condo was hers before we married. Modern, coastal, full of soft colors and mirrors that made you look slightly better than you were. I'd moved in after the wedding, filling her curated space with my cables and microphones, my humming servers, my noise. She used to call it the lab, half affection, half annoyance. But lately she'd stopped calling it anything. We met at a podcasting workshop 3 years earlier. I was teaching sound design to a group of journalists who thought compression was a metaphor. She was in the back row, pretending to take notes, already charming everyone around her. She wanted to start a lifestyle podcast, interviews about relationships, growth, authenticity, that sort of thing. I showed her how to use a mic. She showed me how to look like I belonged in daylight. We fell fast. She said she loved my calm. I said I loved her chaos. We built a life on that polarity. Her stories, my sound. She spoke, I edited. For a while, it worked. Then came the sponsorships, the followers, the glossy panels about empowerment. She started calling herself a brand storyteller. I kept cutting waveforms in the dark. The balance shifted, but I told myself it was okay. Marriage was an ecosystem, after all. Things grew in different directions. Until tonight. The pier lights blinked twice, the signal for closing. I walked back home slowly, timing my steps with the crash of waves. The sound steadied me. By the time I reached the building, I knew what I'd do. Not revenge, not yet. Something quieter. Observation. That night I couldn't sleep, so I took out one of my old field recorders. I'd used it years ago for a documentary about whale migration, the kind of project that made me feel useful. The recorder still smelled faintly of salt and metal. I tested it, still crisp. I set it up under the vent that connected our condo to hers. Sound traveled through those ducts like secrets through walls. For the next few days, I kept to my routine. I went to work, fixed light fixtures, tested sound systems for the local radio affiliate. Lila thought I was distant. I let her. She had meetings, events, brunches. I had cables, tools, excuses. At night, when she thought I was asleep, she'd text. I heard the vibration through the mattress. I never asked who it was. I didn't need to. The recorder picked up fragments. Not always words, sometimes just tones, laughter, the wet click of a cork, the rush of the shower next door. Enough to build a texture of truth. And through it all, I stayed calm, patient, careful. One evening, about a week after the Bluetooth betrayal, I came home to find her on the balcony, wearing one of my shirts. For a second, I saw her the way I used to. Someone alive with purpose. She turned and smiled. "Hey, stranger. Hey." "You've been quiet lately." "Work," I said. She nodded, like that was an acceptable answer. "I'm hosting a dinner Friday, just a few friends. You okay with that?" "Of course," I said. "I'll stay out of the way." Her eyes searched mine for something, maybe guilt or resentment, but I kept my expression level. Years of editing had taught me how to erase emotion without deleting meaning. That Friday, I left early for the pier, but I didn't go to work. I parked near the dunes and watched the windows of our condo from a distance. Lights flickered, shadows moved. I knew their voices by shape now, the way Bryce's syllables hit like polished stones, Kendra's sharp edges, Lila's rhythm rising and falling like waves. When I came back hours later, the place smelled like rosemary and spilled wine. I picked through the mess in the kitchen. Plates stacked wrong, glasses with lipstick rims, a napkin with a phone number written in neat, confident handwriting. Bryce. The next day, I transferred the audio from the recorder. I listened for hours, isolating frequencies, cleaning noise, pulling voices out from the hum. It was almost professional, the way I handled it. Detached. I made folders, labeled by date, time, tone. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe part of me still thought like a producer, organizing chaos into narrative. The first clear phrase I captured came from Bryce. "You deserve better," he said. Then Lila. "Don't, it's complicated." Then silence, a long one, followed by the faint sound of something soft against fabric. That was the moment I knew. The air left my lungs in a controlled exhale. I didn't smash anything, didn't shout. I just sat there, watching the waveform ripple across the screen like a pulse. I zoomed in, played it back, watched it again. The sound of betrayal had a frequency, around 180 hertz, low and steady. I closed the file and sat in the dark for a long time. I realized I wasn't angry in the way I expected. Not hot, not explosive, just cold, precise, like the pause before a tone test. In the following weeks, I gathered more. I didn't need to spy anymore. She wasn't hiding. The late nights, the distant smiles, the phone always face down. It was all part of the same frequency. One night, I found her asleep on the couch, phone still unlocked. A text thread glowed on the screen. Bryce. "Tomorrow night? My place." Her reply? "Can't. He's around. Soon." I took a screenshot, then deleted the message from her phone. Not to hide it, just to measure what she'd notice. She didn't. By mid-September, the condo felt like a stage set between scenes. She spoke softly, carefully, as if we were actors reading from a script. I played along, we shared breakfast, exchanged logistics, smiled for neighbors, but beneath it all, something hollow thudded. Then one night she said, "Ethan, can we talk?" I'd been expecting it. "Sure," I said. She sat across from me, wringing her hands. "I think we've both known for a while. We're not connecting." "Connecting," I repeated. She nodded. "It's nobody's fault. We just grew apart," I finished. Her relief was visible. "Yes, exactly. Grown apart." She thought she was steering the conversation. She thought this was her moment, her narrative. I smiled. "Okay." She blinked. "Okay?" "Yeah," I said softly. "We'll make it mutual, clean, no drama." She exhaled, shoulders relaxing. "Thank you." "Of course," I said. "After Labor Day, right?" She froze, just for a second. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching for how I knew. Then she smiled again, small and careful. "Yeah, after Labor Day." That night, I deleted the recordings. Or rather, I made her think I did. I let her watch me drag the folders to the trash and empty it. But the real files were safe, stored under a different name, on a drive labeled Work Archive 2020. I didn't want to ruin her. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to be edited. I began constructing a new project, an audio piece called Feedback. I mixed ambient sound from the pier, snippets of conversation, laughter from that first Bluetooth leak. I layered them into something hypnotic, uneasy. Her voice drifted in and out, distorted, almost unrecognizable. When the piece was done, I submitted it anonymously to a local arts podcast under a pseudonym. They accepted it immediately. A week later, it aired. The episode opened with laughter. Hers, mine, Bryce's. Then came the line, "I'll tell him after Labor Day." The hosts praised it as a haunting exploration of intimacy and deception. Lila didn't realize it was us at first, but when she did, I saw it in her face. The moment recognition hit, the way her expression flickered between denial and horror. She didn't say anything that night. The next morning, she was gone. I kept the apartment. I kept the pier job. I kept the silence. People online debated the meaning of feedback. Some said it was a metaphor for digital surveillance. Others thought it was about grief. A few claimed it was performance art. Nobody guessed it was true. Weeks passed. Fall crept in, the gulls left. I started sleeping again. Sometimes I'd play the episode on low volume, just to hear it echo through the vents. The laughter still hurt, but less each time. Then, one evening, I found a new message in my inbox. No name, just a subject line. "You win." Inside, "You always wanted control of the narrative. Congratulations. I hope you're proud." No signature, but I knew it was her. I closed the laptop and sat there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the low rush of the ocean through the open window. The world was full of feedback, sounds bouncing off walls, returning changed. Maybe that was all any of us ever did. Record, edit, replay. The next morning, I went to the pier early. The sky was pale, the kind of gray that looks like it forgot how to be blue. I watched the waves for a long time, thinking about how sound travels through water faster than air. That's why whales can talk across oceans. Maybe that's what I'd been doing all along, trying to send something across the distance, hoping it would reach her before it drowned. I took out my recorder one last time. I set it on the railing and pressed record. "Test, 1, 2, I said softly. "This is Ethan." The wind caught my words and pulled them apart. "Sometimes the story ends before you notice," I said. "Sometimes it keeps going after you wish it would stop." I let the recorder run until the battery died. Later that day, I played it back. The sound was almost pure static, but beneath it, if you listened closely, you could hear the sea, the gulls, and somewhere in the distance, faint and broken, the echo of laughter. And for the first time in months, it didn't sound like betrayal. It just sounded like life. Messy, overlapping, unfinished. I archived the file, labeled it simply closure.wav, and stored it next to feedback. Then I walked to the window, opened it wide, and let the wind carry in the sound of the ocean again. I stood there for a long time, breathing in salt and light, until I could almost believe that the story wasn't ending, just changing frequencies. Weeks turned to months. Winter softened the coast, dulled the color of the sky. I kept to my routines, work, coffee, long walks on the pier. I still listened to the world the way a sound engineer does, separating layers, finding harmony in noise. Sometimes I'd catch bits of other people's lives drifting through open windows, a child's laugh, a fight muffled by drywall, music bleeding from a party down the street. Every sound told a story. Every silence did too. And sometimes, late at night, when the tide was high and the air was full of fog, I'd swear I could hear Lila's voice again. Faint, distant, carried through the vents, or maybe just memory. But I didn't reach for the recorder anymore. I let it fade, the way an echo eventually does. Because I'd learned something in the noise. You can't edit real life into coherence. You can only decide what to keep and what to let go, so I let go. The world kept spinning. The Bluetooth connection stayed off. And somewhere, in the static between stations, my own laugh found its way back to me. Before we go any further, hit the hype button, take a second to subscribe, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? The next week, I treated Greybridge like a stage set. During daylight, tourists clogged the boardwalk, kids begging for taffy, gulls dive bombing fries. At night, it belonged to the workers, ride techs, janitors, and me, the freelance audio guy who patched cables for WGBR7's local events. I knew where every camera pointed, and, more important, where they didn't. The boardwalk was a maze of reflections and noise. a place where laughter turned metallic after midnight and the smell of salt water mixed with oil from the carousel gears. Every plank, every corroded railing, every forgotten service tunnel hummed with its own small secrets. Gus Pennington, night supervisor, spotted me rewiring an outlet near the Ferris wheel. He was built like the machines he maintained, broad, slow-moving, impossible to knock over. "You look like a man planning arson," he said, his cigarette ember glowing like an orange eye in the dark. "Just fixing bad connections," I said, looping the wire through my fingers. I could feel the static tingle through the rubber coating. I liked that. It reminded me the current was alive, like a sleeping animal. He puffed smoke and squinted. Bad connections burn hotter. He didn't ask more. Gus believed everyone deserved one quiet vendetta. He lived by that. Maybe that's why I trusted him enough to linger near his maintenance shed, pretending to test sound meters when what I was really doing was studying camera sightlines. I knew where the blind spots were, behind the saltwater taffy stand, under the cracked sign for the tilt-a-whirl, and along the western edge of the pier, where the sea's breath coated the lenses with salt. If you wanted to vanish, you didn't need to leave Greybridge. You just needed to know where to stand. Back at the condo, Lila floated through rehearsed smiles and Pilates posts. She had that effortless kind of perfection that only looks easy when it's practiced every day. Hair twisted into loose waves that seemed accidental, skin always just sun-kissed enough to look unbothered. I noticed her new perfume first, something citrusy Bryce probably picked out. Then the tablet calendar she left open on the kitchen island. Private sunset shoot, Dalton rooftop. I screenshotted it, not because I needed more proof, but because patterns mattered. Patterns made stories believable when people started doubting you. Screenshots were just punctuation in the sentence I was already writing in my head. The condo looked over the marina, a line of sailboats swaying like metronomes. We'd chosen it for the view, or at least that's what we'd told ourselves. Now the view felt like surveillance. Every reflection, every wave, another reminder of how visible everything was. I'd walk past the big window and feel like someone on the street below could see through me. Lila didn't notice, or maybe she did, but she liked being watched. People like Bryce always did. I spent that week walking the pier's catwalks, measuring angles, testing the new LED array on the Ferris wheel. The boardwalk smelled of brine and fried dough, of sweat and nostalgia. At dawn, when fog crept in from the bay and muffled the gulls, I'd sit beneath the wheel with my laptop balanced on a coil of cable, programming test phrases into the light grid. One morning, I typed a joke. "Private sunsets, Bryce?" The letters glowed faintly through the mist, hanging above the town like a half-remembered threat. I told Gus it was just to check the letter spacing. He chuckled, wiped condensation off his clipboard, and went back to his coffee. By night, I studied Bryce's social feed. Public posts gave away everything: condo location from window views, favorite cafe from tagged friends, even his parking spot. The same blue coupe, same background mural, a faded painting of a lighthouse with the caption, "Be your own beacon." All open source, all legal. People hand you their privacy wrapped in filters. You just have to know how to unwrap it. I pocketed a spare mic belt pack from the station, old cleared gear. To anyone else it was junk. To me it was a prop for later. A small piece of theater. The kind of thing that would make sense when the story needed sound effects. By Wednesday, the routine had a rhythm. Morning, fog, gulls, cold coffee. Afternoon, tourists, laughter, static-filled walkie chatter from Gus's crew. Night, me alone with the Ferris wheel's heartbeat. The boardwalk lights shimmered on the wet planks, their reflections breaking whenever a wave slapped against the pilings. Greybridge wasn't glamorous. It was peeling paint and melted taffy and salt-stung eyes, but it had presence, a kind of faded grandeur, like an actor past his prime still hitting his marks. I began mapping the town in layers. The official Greybridge, full of brochures and postcards, ended at the souvenir shop near the pier. Beyond that was the workers' Greybridge, the after-hours strip where everything smelled of ammonia and grease. Past midnight, the arcades went dark, the rides powered down, and the hum of generators became the town's pulse. That's when I felt most at home. You could hear every echo, every whispered deal behind the ticket booth, every gull cry turned ghostly by the wind. Gus sometimes joined me for a cigarette, though I never smoked. He'd lean against the railing, staring at the sea like it might answer something. "This place," he said once, "ain't built to last. Salt eats everything. Steel, wood, hearts. It don't care." He flicked his cigarette into the water, watched it vanish. "But it sure puts on a show." I nodded. He didn't know how right he was. Lila texted that Thursday night, a photo of wine glasses and string lights, captioned, "Late meeting." I zoomed in, saw the reflection of the Dalton rooftop terrace, recognizable from its distinct railing pattern. Bryce's watch gleamed in the corner of the frame. Subtle, but there. The kind of oversight people make when they believe in coincidence more than observation. I archived the photo in a folder titled Production Notes. I'd stopped feeling anger by then. What replaced it was closer to curiosity. Betrayal, once dissected, becomes a science of details. Who, when, how often, each answer another brushstroke. I wasn't planning revenge, not yet. I just wanted the story straight before it started writing itself without me. Friday night, Gus handed me a flashlight and said, "Got a short near the fortune teller's stall. Might need your touch." His flashlight beams danced across the boards as we walked. The smell of seaweed thickened as the tide rose. We passed the haunted house ride, its skeletons drooping from years of humidity. "You ever go in there?" he asked. "Once," I said. Didn't like the mirrors. He laughed. "Nobody does. They don't show ghosts. They show intentions." I thought about that while fixing the fuse. The fortune teller's booth was shuttered, its painted eyes staring blankly through the bars. I imagined her cards scattered inside, whispering truths no one wanted to hear. Gus's words echoed. Intentions. That's what burned hotter than bad connections. Back at the condo, Lila was asleep, her makeup still perfect, phone glowing with unread messages. I watched her chest rise and fall and thought about how easy it is to look peaceful when someone else is doing the watching. Her perfume lingered in the air, sharp and sweet. I opened the window, let the sea air in, and listened to the faint hum of the Ferris wheel down the coast. My name wasn't on her calendar anymore. Saturday morning, WGBR7 ran a segment on Greybridge's summer kickoff. They used my audio mix, the one with the crowd murmur just low enough to make the laughter sound hollow. I sat in the editing booth, watching the playback on the monitor. The anchor smiled too wide. Behind her, the Ferris wheel turned, colors blending into a slow spiral. My test message had long been cleared, but I could still see ghost traces of the letters when the frame froze. Private sunsets. A flicker. Then gone. Bryce appeared on screen for an interview clip. Producer credit. Perfect teeth. Confident tone. "Greybridge is a local treasure," he said. "It's about community, family, and capturing those perfect summer moments." I turned up the gain slightly. In the background, a gull screeched over his last word, distorting the sound. Fitting. That night, I took the belt pack apart. Its casing smelled faintly of dust and old circuitry. Inside was the transmitter chip, small enough to disappear behind a ride console or a stage prop. I soldered a fresh wire, reattached the antenna, and tested it, static. Then my voice, faint and delayed through the monitor. Testing, 1, 2. It worked. The prop was ready, though I still wasn't sure what scene it belonged to. Greybridge after midnight was a different world. Streetlights flickered, their halos cutting through fog like spotlights searching for lost actors. The boardwalk creaked under my boots, and somewhere a mechanical laugh from the closed funhouse echoed, triggered by humidity. I walked past shuttered kiosks, past the frozen Ferris wheel cabins, each one a capsule of suspended memory. The ocean was loud that night, pushing against the pier like it wanted in. I found myself near the Dalton building, just 3 blocks inland. Its rooftop terrace glimmered faintly through the haze, strings of lights swaying in the wind. I pictured Lila there, wineglass in hand, camera pointed at her, Bryce's voice behind the lens. "Perfect," he'd say. "Hold that smile." I wondered if she knew how much of herself she gave away in each frame. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe she thought being looked at was the same as being loved. On Sunday, Gus didn't show up for his shift. Word was he'd taken a week off to visit family inland. The pier felt emptier without him, like the set had lost its stage manager. I worked alone, calibrating the sound system for the upcoming fireworks show. Every echo, every feedback loop, every hum in the cables became part of a language only I understood. The boardwalk was my orchestra pit, and I was tuning it for a finale no one else expected. That evening, a storm rolled in, thin sheets of rain sweeping across the sea, thunder rolling like applause. I stood under the Ferris wheel canopy, watching the lights flicker against the wet planks. The LEDs rippled, glitching slightly from the moisture. Private sunsets. The phrase reappeared for half a second, unprompted, like a ghost in the code. I stared at it, unsure if it was a malfunction or memory. The rain washed it away. Back home, Lila was on a video call. "Just wrap up edits," she said when she noticed me. Her voice was smooth, but her eyes darted toward the corner of the screen where someone else's reflection flickered. Bryce's reflection. I didn't mention it. I just nodded, set my tool case down, and said, I'll be on the balcony. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled metallic, charged. From the balcony, Greybridge glowed faintly under the cloud break. The Ferris wheel's lights pulsed like a heartbeat. I thought of Gus's words again. Bad connections burn hotter. He wasn't wrong. They also illuminate better, if you know how to watch. Monday came, and WGBR7 sent me to the Dalton rooftop for sound setup. Coincidence, they said. The same private sunset spot from Lila's calendar. I arrived early, pretending to adjust levels, placing mics, running cables along the perimeter. The rooftop overlooked the whole pier. From there, Greybridge looked smaller, almost artificial, like a diorama. I could see the Ferris wheel spinning, the crowd ants below. Perfect vantage point for a broadcast, or for a confession. When Bryce arrived, he gave me the kind of nod people reserve for hired help. "Audio check good?" he asked, flashing his producer smile. "Solid," I said. "Signal's clean." I tapped the belt pack clipped to my pocket. He didn't notice. People like him never notice the tools that make their voices heard. Lila showed up later, wrapped in a shawl, looking effortlessly rehearsed. "Hey," she said softly, like she wasn't sure whether to be guilty or casual. I answered with a technician's politeness. "Hey, levels might run hot with wind gusts. Just a heads up." She nodded, eyes flicking to Bryce, then back to me. "I trust you," she said, and it almost sounded sincere. The shoot began. Cameras rolled, lights glared against the sunset. Bryce directed in low tones, stepping close, adjusting her hair. I watched from behind the mixer, pretending to monitor waveforms. The mic picked up everything. The murmur of the wind, the click of camera shutters, their laughter. Too intimate, too rehearsed. I kept recording. When it ended, I stayed behind to pack up. They lingered near the railing, city glow painting them in amber. From where I stood, they looked like figures from a commercial. Effortless, untouchable. But the mic captured the truth beneath the image. A whisper, a sigh, the sound of someone saying, "No one has to know." That was enough. I didn't confront them. I didn't need to. The story was already unfolding, and I was just the one ensuring it had good audio. The next day, during the fireworks rehearsal, I fed the recorded track into the Ferris wheel's PA test line. The sound echoed faintly across the empty pier, words dissolving into static before anyone could recognize them. It wasn't revenge. It was rehearsal. By Friday, Greybridge was buzzing again. Tourists returned, unaware of anything but the promise of summer. Kids screamed on rides, seagulls circled, and the smell of popcorn drowned everything else. The Ferris wheel lights blazed clean, no trace of messages this time. I stood beneath it, headset crackling, and thought about how stories never really end. They just fade into new frequencies. At midnight, I walked the boardwalk one last time. The sea was calm, moonlight slicing the waves into silver ribbons. I passed the fortune teller's booth again. This time, the shutter was half open, a single candle burning inside. I almost stepped closer, but didn't. Some things are better left unmeasured. When I reached the pier's edge, I looked back at Greybridge. The Ferris wheel, the boardwalk, the shadows where cameras didn't reach. It all looked perfect from a distance, but every stage looks perfect from the seats. You have to step behind the curtains to see the wires, the cracks, the people holding it all together with tape and willpower. Revenge needs rehearsal. I started small. It wasn't the cinematic sort of vengeance that burns hot and reckless. It was cold, deliberate, calibrated. A performance, really. Every cue mattered. Every pause was a test of restraint. I told myself it wasn't about hurting anyone. Not really. It was about symmetry, about balance, about showing that a narrative could be rewritten by the one who'd been edited out of it. Through Delia Moore, the associate producer at WGBR7, I booked Lila for a coastal living morning segment. Delia liked people who spoke quickly and delivered promises even quicker. She liked being in the middle of things, where gossip and opportunity blurred into the same sound. I told her Lila was perfect for the show, a rising local designer with a knack for reinventing old spaces. Delia didn't need much convincing. She was always hunting for pretty faces that looked good next to coffee mugs and floral sets. Lila thought it was exposure for her brand. That's how I framed it anyway. A lifestyle slot to promote her coastal minimalism boutique. She'd always wanted validation from the right circles, the ones that looked effortless on camera but reeked of quiet calculation. I could picture her already rehearsing her segment in front of her bathroom mirror, deciding between blouses, adjusting her smile. She'd have that look, bright, contained, hungry. I ran the soundboard that morning. I'd done it 100 times before for the station. News intros, soft jazz transitions, polite applause cues. My hands knew the sliders like a pianist's fingers knew ivory. When the host introduced her, local designer and entrepreneur Lila Grange. I waited until the title card faded. Then I swapped the bumper music to Bryce's real theme, the same stock track he used for his real estate videos. It was subtle, too subtle for most, just an innocuous, royalty-free melody, a few guitar strums, a synthetic whistle, the upbeat tempo of coastal success stories. But anyone who'd ever worked with Bryce would recognize it instantly, his signature sound, his stamp of self-branding. Lila froze for half a beat before smiling too wide, her eyes darting to the camera light as though she could burn through it with sheer will. Only insiders would notice, but cracks had started to show. You could see it in the way she touched her necklace twice, a nervous tic she tried to disguise as poise. The host kept smiling, unaware, asking questions about her inspiration, her use of reclaimed wood, her love for authentic textures. After the segment, Delia cornered me in the control booth. "That was slick timing," she said. "Accident?" "Sure," I said. Her grin said she didn't believe me. Delia thrived on chaos disguised as professionalism. She'd been in TV long enough to know when something unscripted had value. The network called it organic moments. She called it leverage. And in that brief smirk, I saw calculation flicker. She was already imagining how that tension, Lila's too bright smile, the offbeat music, could translate into gossip, maybe even a follow-up piece. 2 days later, the fog rolled in thick and early. The Ferris wheel loomed like a ghost spine above the boardwalk, its lights smothered in pale mist. It was the perfect canvas. The old test lights still worked. Private sunsets, Bryce? 15 seconds of glowing letters cast against the fog. A question only 2 people would understand. I watched from a distance, 3 blocks away, coffee cooling in my hand. I'd timed it with the dawn joggers, the seagulls screaming over trash bins, the world half asleep. And right on cue, Lila appeared. Ponytail swinging, wireless earbuds in, her stride crisp and mechanical. She stopped mid-step when the letters flared to life. "Private sunsets, Bryce?" The mist shimmered orange and then swallowed the words again. She stared, frozen, her phone already out, but the message was gone. She turned in circles, scanning for the source. By the time she raised her camera, all that remained was fog. I took another sip of coffee, let the bitterness settle. Bryce wasn't amused. That afternoon he found me on the boardwalk while I was fixing a speaker by the arcade entrance. He came dressed like success, pressed shirt, loafers, the air of a man who thought confrontation looked better in daylight. His voice was too loud for the quiet between us. "You think this is funny?" he said. I didn't look up right away. I adjusted the cable, tested the static, let the silence stretch. "I think you overestimate how often I think about you," I said finally. He lunged, fast but sloppy. His loafers slipped on wet planks. I didn't touch him, just watched him curse and stagger, his jacket streaked with salt water when he stumbled near the railing. "You've got issues," he spat. "Probably," I said, "but I don't broadcast them in drone footage." He stormed off, leaving a trail of angry footprints. I waited until he was gone before exhaling. The air smelled of brine and fried dough. The Ferris wheel lights blinked weakly in the distance, as if applauding. That night, Lila deleted half our photos from her feed. The couple shots at festivals, the boardwalk selfies, the anniversary dinner with wine glasses and forced laughter, all gone. Next morning, she posted a single photo, a sunset hand-holding shot cropped just shy of showing Bryce's face. The caption read, "Some endings are beginnings." I almost admired the efficiency. She knew the algorithm of heartbreak, how to curate loss, how to make it look intentional. Every post was a performance. I should have known. She learned from the best. Delia caught me later that week, watching the replay of the morning broadcast. "You gunning for a story?" she asked. "Maybe just closure," I said. She tilted her head, eyes sharp. Closure plays well at 10 o'clock. She filed that in whatever producer drawer held potential content. That should have been the end. But revenge, like radio feedback, hums even after you switch off the feed. The echo lingers. Delia called me 2 days later. "We're doing a follow-up piece," she said. "Local entrepreneurs and the illusion of success. Thought you might have some insider color." I almost laughed. "You want me to talk about Lila?" "Not by name," she said. "Just stories, archetypes, whatever sounds authentic." Authenticity, the industry's favorite illusion. I said yes. Partly because I wanted to see where it would go, partly because I wanted to test the limits of my own detachment. On camera, you can confess anything if you smile right after. The studio lights were warmer than usual. Delia stood behind the teleprompter, arms crossed, watching like a director waiting for her lead to improvise. I talked about ambition, about coastal towns reinventing themselves, about how social media made everyone into a brand. I kept my tone detached, observational, never bitter. I was careful with my words, each one a tiny blade hidden in velvet. Afterward, Delia nodded approvingly. "You've got a good cadence," she said, "like someone who's seen things." "Maybe just someone who remembers," I said. The segment aired quietly, tucked between weather and a local surf report. But online, clips started circulating. People liked the tone, thoughtful, wounded, relatable. Some guessed who I was referring to. Others didn't care. For a moment, the narrative shifted again. Lila must have seen it. A week later, she posted a new video. Her sitting in her studio, sunlight washing over jars of driftwood and linen samples. She talked about resilience, creativity, forgiveness. She didn't name me, but she didn't need to. Her voice trembled in just the right places. Bryce reappeared in her comments section, using his business account to leave a heart emoji. Predictable. That night, I found myself back at the pier, the one where everything had started years ago. The first pitch video, the first real smile that wasn't for the camera. The sea was loud with wind. I walked past the shuttered stalls, the echo of carnival music long gone. The Ferris wheel stood still, a silhouette of memory. Delia called again. "People are talking," she said. "You and her, the whole subtext thing. It's good TV." "I'm not a story," I said. "Everyone's a story if you cut it right," she replied. She wasn't wrong. In her world, everything was edit points and emotional beats. Truth was optional, rhythm wasn't. Weeks passed. The town settled back into its routines. Tourists taking selfies against sun-bleached murals, vendors selling nostalgia by the slice. I thought maybe I'd done enough, that the balance had been restored. But then the late summer festival came, the one Lila always designed the main installation for. This year's theme, Reflections of Home. She'd been chosen again, probably to complete the redemption arc. Delia covered it live. She asked if I wanted to handle audio for the event. I hesitated, then said yes. Old habits die with rehearsal. The night of the festival, the boardwalk was packed. Lanterns swayed in the wind. The installation was stunning, a mirrored tunnel lined with sand-blasted quotes about belonging. Lila's name glowed at the entrance. Halfway through the event, during her speech, I queued up the track list. Her mic carried across the crowd, her voice soft and rehearsed. She thanked the sponsors, the city, the creative team. Then, without warning, I layered in a faint echo beneath her audio feed, a looped whisper of the line she'd used in that old promotional video with Bryce. "Sometimes the view is worth the risk." The phrase repeated, subtle but unmistakable, a haunting refrain. Lila froze again, for just a second. Her eyes scanned the sound booth instinctively, but the crowd kept applauding, oblivious. I watched her recalibrate in real time, her professional composure sliding back into place like armor. After the broadcast, Delia found me outside near the equipment van. "You've got a talent for timing," she said. "I've had practice." She smiled. "If you ever get tired of fixing other people's stories, you could always write your own." Maybe she meant it kindly, maybe not. That night, long after the crowd dispersed, I walked the empty boardwalk again. The mirrors from the installation caught the moonlight, fractured it into slivers. My reflection appeared a dozen times, each one slightly warped. I looked at myself and thought, every act of revenge is just another edit, another attempt to control the narrative you lost. Lila would recover. Bryce would pivot, as he always did. Delia would package the whole thing into a teaser for next season's Local Voices. And me? I'd keep adjusting sound levels, fine-tuning other people's chaos, hiding in plain sight. Maybe let it rest. And I'd almost listen. Yet the next morning, I'd find myself scrolling through Lila's page again, watching the polished videos, the clean captions, the curated calm. I'd study the frames the way an engineer studies fault lines. Every perfect surface has tension underneath. Delia's words echoed, "Everyone's a story if you cut it right." Maybe I'd already been cut into one long before the first cue played, before the first act of revenge felt like justice. The funny thing about rehearsal is, if you do it long enough, it starts to feel real. You forget you're practicing, you forget there's supposed to be an ending, and maybe that's what revenge really is. Not the satisfaction of payback, but the endless performance of control. A show you can't stop running because the silence afterward feels worse. So I kept showing up. To the station, to the pier, to the flickering screens that replayed moments I could no longer undo. I adjusted volume, rewired microphones, smiled at coworkers who thought I'd moved on. I lived in the feedback loop. Sometimes I'd see Lila at events, her smile perfectly reconstructed. We'd nod like strangers. Once, during a charity gala, she leaned close and whispered, "Still directing the background noise?" I smiled. "Still pretending it's harmony?" Her laughter was brief, brittle, and real. Afterward, Delia texted me a single line. "You two should be a series." I didn't reply. That night, I drove out past the boardwalk, where the old radio tower still blinked red over the dunes. I climbed up halfway, wind cutting against my jacket, and watched the town below, tiny lights, moving stories. I thought about all the ways we broadcast ourselves, all the frequencies overlapping. Maybe closure was just another channel no one could quite tune into. The sea roared below, indifferent. The fog crept in again, wrapping the town like an unfinished thought. Somewhere out there, a carousel turned, music faint through static. And for the first time in months, I didn't think about Bryce. I didn't think about Lila. I thought about silence. The pure kind, the kind before any story begins. It lasted less than a minute. Then I climbed down, turned on my phone, and checked the feed. By now, the Sandbar 3 buzzed around Lila like flies on sugar. They trailed her through the marina walkways and the little boutique corridors near the dunes, always orbiting, always laughing too loudly, always rehearsing the story of her triumph. She was their star, their cause, their validation. They planned a charity gala, the perfect stage for her amicable split reveal, an event drenched in sequins, sentiment, and social currency. Bryce promised a drone-filmed kiss at golden hour, a cinematic farewell to a relationship that had already been embalmed for the cameras. He had that director's mind, always thinking about framing, about what the light would do to her hair when she turned her head toward the sea. I watched them for days as the preparations gathered momentum. Lila approved floral palettes and tasting menus, pretending to care about the details while checking her reflection in the back of her phone case. The Sandbar 3, Mara, Jen, and Kale handled logistics with the breathless reverence of disciples. They were already discussing hashtags, press releases, and sponsorship mentions. The word charity glittered on their lips like a protective charm. The cause itself, some vague fund for coastal cleanup, was only the garnish. What mattered was the optics, the gracious ex, the creative partner turned ally, the woman who could rise above heartbreak and turn it into a brand. Bryce had rented an entire corner of the boardwalk for the shoot, complete with champagne stations, lanterns, and a makeshift stage. I'd heard him call the plan spontaneous authenticity, a phrase so carefully engineered it made my teeth ache. They'd play a montage on the big screen, footage of them laughing in the surf, arms looped, his hair wet, her eyeliner perfect, and then she'd make her speech about closure, self-love, and new beginnings. Somewhere between the applause and the drone's final arc, she would kiss him one last time. A kiss for the world, not for him. I made one safety call to the pier office, citing new FAA guidelines about crowd density and coastal flight paths. It was the sort of call I'd made 100 times when I worked maintenance for the city. My voice still carried the right mixture of boredom and authority. The clerk on the other end sighed, opened a form, and promised to review the permit. That was enough. Bureaucracy is the cleanest weapon in America. You don't need malice or muscle when you have an outdated regulation and a slow fax machine. The next morning, the Sandbar group arrived to find a polite but firm notice taped to the concession booth. Drone operations temporarily suspended pending authorization. Bryce's jaw tensed. Lila's perfect nails tapped against her phone as she sent a flurry of messages to contacts. By noon, the photographer had pivoted to handheld shots and intimate B-roll, but the mood had soured. The golden hour kiss would have to wait. Meanwhile, I had other plans. I planted my old mic belt pack on a bench near the merry-go-round, a relic from my years doing AV work for local bands. The battery compartment was corroded, the antenna was snapped. Lila and Bryce often sat there between takes, whispering conspiratorially while pretending to share a private moment. They'd chosen that bench because it was just out of range from the lighting rigs, half hidden by the painted horses that went up and down with a sad metallic rhythm. I wasn't spying, not in the way they'd accuse me of. The belt pack didn't even function. My real recorder was my phone, tucked legally behind the cotton candy booth where I'd been helping replace a breaker. I had clearance to be there. The law was my camouflage, and so was familiarity. People rarely question the man who fixes things. They look past you, assume you belong to the infrastructure. From where I worked, I could see them the entire time. The boardwalk's music bled through the speakers, nostalgic carousel tunes mixed with the crash of waves and the shrill laughter of tourists. I leaned against the booth, pretending to check the fuse box, while their conversation drifted easily through the salty air. Bryce, he'll fold if we push. He always folds. Lila, we'll call him unstable. People believe the calm ones are faking it. There it was, my reputation pre-written in their mouths, a story forming before it ever hit the internet. They didn't even lower their voices. To them, I was already a footnote, a complication to be managed. I could have interrupted them. I could have stepped out from behind the booth, shown them I'd heard every word. But I didn't. Instead, I finished tightening the panel screw and wiped my hands on my jeans. I let them keep talking, though most of it was muffled now by the carousel's rising hum. That night, when the crowds thinned and the tide pushed the litter into soft heaps along the sand, I sat in my truck watching the reflections of the fairground lights on the windshield. My phone screen glowed like a warning buoy. I typed one message, short enough to sting, and sent it to her personal number, the one she'd never blocked because she liked to keep me half-reachable. Unstable? How? I watched the status bar change. Message delivered. Then the little bubbles appeared, hesitated, vanished, returned, vanished again. It went on for nearly an hour, the digital pulse of her indecision. I imagined her sitting in that rented beach house surrounded by half-empty glasses of rosé, the sandbar 3 still buzzing in the background, trying to script her next move. She never replied. I slept in the truck that night. Engine off, window cracked. The sea air made everything smell faintly of rust and sugar. I dreamed of wires, of tangled cords that hummed like living veins, and woke to seagulls screaming at the dawn. Over the next few days, the gala morphed into something even grander. The delay had only heightened the anticipation. Lila posted updates in soft pastel fonts. So excited to celebrate love and growth with you all, while Bryce curated behind-the-scenes reels that looked candid, but weren't. Their followers multiplied like algae blooms after a storm. Every post shimmered with curated sincerity. I kept working around the pier, the invisible man behind their spectacle. When you handle maintenance, you see everything. You learn which locks don't really latch, which cameras are dummies, which dumpsters hide forgotten props. You learn how little separates the real from the performative. Once, during a break, I saw Lila standing alone by the railing, her hair whipping in the wind. For a second, she looked almost human, tired, unfiltered. But then she turned toward her phone again, angling her face into that familiar half-smile. The transformation was instant, like a light flicking on. The Sandbar 3 followed her everywhere, armed with clipboards and endless optimism. Mara handled outreach, calling local businesses for donations. Jen coordinated the volunteers, a rotating cast of college interns desperate for exposure. Cale managed media, his word for gossip. They were a production team disguised as friends. I found myself studying them the way a scientist might study invasive species. They thrived on attention, consumed it, converted it into currency. Around them, everything became a performance. Grief, generosity, even guilt. And Lila, ever the chameleon, knew exactly how to feed them what they wanted. The week before the gala, Bryce cornered me near the equipment shed. He wore his practiced grin, the one that never quite reached his eyes. "Hey, man," he said, casual as a cigarette burn. "We're good for Saturday, right? Wouldn't want any more permit mix-ups." I shrugged. "If your paperwork's clean, there won't be a problem." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Look, I know you've got history with her. Everyone does. But this event's important. Let's keep things smooth, yeah?" "Smooth," I repeated. He smiled again and walked away, leaving the scent of cologne and entitlement hanging in the air. That night, I replayed the carousel recording. The words unstable and fold hit harder than before. They weren't planning a breakup. They were preparing a narrative. And I was the antagonist, the unstable ex. The man who couldn't handle her success, who'd tried to sabotage her big moment out of spite. I thought about confronting her again, but what would that accomplish? She'd already chosen her story, and the world always prefers a story with a villain. Still, I couldn't stop watching the typing bubbles appear and disappear in my memory, that strange ghost of almost communication. It was the closest thing to truth between us, the things unsent, the confessions edited out before transmission. The day of the gala arrived with a sky too clear to be trusted. The boardwalk gleamed like a stage floor. Vendors lined the pier with banners and fairy lights, and a local band tuned their instruments near the dunes. I kept to the periphery, checking circuits, pretending to troubleshoot a speaker cable that didn't need fixing. At sunset, Lila emerged from the rented bungalow in a dress the color of spilled champagne. Cameras followed her like loyal pets. Bryce met her halfway down the steps, taking her hand with just the right mix of affection and detachment. The crowd sighed as if on cue. Their speech began, her voice soft, his confident. She talked about resilience, partnership, and how love could evolve. He thanked her for her grace. They kissed to applause. Without the drone, the moment felt smaller, almost real. But even from my distance, I saw the calculation in her posture. Every gesture rehearsed, every smile an angle. And when her eyes flicked toward me, just once, brief as a blade, I saw no regret, no recognition, only control. Afterward, when the crowd drifted toward the after-party, I walked down to the water. The tide had come in high, erasing footprints and scattering confetti into the foam. The wind carried fragments of her speech, words like healing, journey, truth. They sounded hollow against the surf. I pulled out my phone and opened our old message thread. The last text still glowed. Unstable how? No reply. I typed another line, just her name, but deleted it before sending. Above me, the sky deepened into indigo. The lights from the pier reflected in the waves like broken signals, scattered transmissions from a story that was never mine to control. Later, I learned that Bryce's production team uploaded the gala footage anyway. Without the drone, they stitched together handheld clips, slow-motion waves, and Lila's glowing face framed by lantern light. The caption read, 2 hearts, 1 story, a new chapter. The video hit 500,000 views overnight. Comments poured in, "You're both so mature, true love never dies, such inspiration." I stopped reading after the first 100, but the internet, like the tide, never really stops. A week later, someone leaked a backstage clip. Bryce yelling at a volunteer, Lila rolling her eyes. It was minor, forgettable, yet it cracked their perfect shell. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Articles appeared about toxic ex-collaborations and the dark side of influencer charity culture. The Sandbar 3 scrambled to patch the holes, issuing statements about context and momentary frustration. I didn't share the recording. I didn't need to. Truth has a way of seeping through, slow as salt water through wood. Every night the pier lights blinked out one by one, leaving only the hum of the breakers. I kept working, silent, unseen. Sometimes I found Lila's flyers still stuck to the posts, curling in the wind. Her face smiled up from the peeling paper, flawless even in decay. I thought about that word, unstable. Maybe she meant emotional, maybe dangerous, and maybe both. But as I walked the quiet boardwalk, I realized instability wasn't always weakness. Sometimes it was motion, resistance, the refusal to freeze into their version of you. The next morning, I returned the broken belt pack to my toolbox. I kept the phone recordings, though I never planned to use them. They were proof, not ammunition, a reminder that I hadn't imagined the conversation, that the story they tried to write around me wasn't the only one that existed. Summer drifted into fall. The Sandbar crowd moved on to other projects. A sustainability podcast, a sponsored retreat in Sedona, a line of branded candles. Lila's posts grew less frequent, her captions more abstract. Healing in progress, one read beneath a photo of the horizon. Bryce disappeared from her feed entirely. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about that night. The bubbles, the message she never sent. Maybe she typed something true and deleted it. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she just stared at the screen, waiting for me to fold again. I never did. The sea kept erasing their footprints, the gulls kept circling the pier, and I kept working the wires, listening to the faint hum beneath the world. There's a certain peace in knowing you can't control the story, only the signal that carries it. And somewhere out beyond the breakers, a drone rusted quietly in its case, still waiting for permission that would never come. The storm rolled in faster than forecast. Thunder over the bay, wind tearing flyers from lampposts. Lila and Bryce still went ahead with their drone shoot because Vanity doesn't check weather reports. Gus had scheduled a power test for the catwalk lights. I just confirmed it. At dusk, the pier plunged into moody half-light, perfect for drama. From the maintenance deck, I watched Bryce pacing on the rooftop, shouting about his ruined lighting. Then he saw me with a coil of cable. "You again?" he said. "Just doing my job," I said. He charged. The catwalk rattled under his shoes. Rain slicked everything. I led him along the maintenance route, narrow rails over the dark water. "Nice shoes," I said. Zero tread. He swung. I sidestepped. His arm caught air, his balance didn't. He toppled into the net rig below, the one meant for dropped tools. He dangled there, cursing, while the drone wobbled and dove into the tide. I climbed down, filmed 5 seconds of him flailing, and walked away. Delia was watching from the boardwalk, camera phone ready. "That's one hell of B-roll," she said. "Not for air," I told her. "Everything's for air," she said. When I got home, Lila was packing for her girls' weekend. She didn't mention the incident. Her smile was stretched too tight. I lay awake listening to rain on the windows, counting how many steps were left in this quiet little war. Morning smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. Bryce's meltdown had already become legend in Greybridge. Real estate hotshot nearly dives off catwalk chasing mystery man. I didn't correct the story. Gossip does the heavy lifting if you let it. By noon, Lila's sponsors started asking, "Are you okay?" in that friendly but nervous tone. Kendra recorded a podcast segment titled Toxic Partnerships and How to Exit Gracefully. She didn't name names, but the subtext wore my initials. That night I found Bryce's coupe gleaming under the condo lights, his pride and joy. I rented an ice cream cart from a vendor friend, legally, and parked it beside him. A faulty valve leaked melted cream onto the pavement. By sunrise, gulls had redecorated his car with vengeance from the sky. No damage, just public humiliation and a cleaning bill. Bryce posted a rant about jealous husbands, tagging me. Lila's sponsors froze her brand deals within hours. No company wants to trend for the wrong reason. Delia called. You free for fireworks weekend? I want to feature the pier crew, human faces, local heroes. Why me? I asked. You've got timing, she said, and people love underdogs. I knew bait when I saw it, but I said yes. The night after the call, rain returned like bad memory. I was driving home from the station when headlights flared in my mirror. Bryce's blue coupe, repaired and furious. He tailed close enough that I could smell burnt rubber. The causeway was a 2-lane ribbon over dark water. I kept my speed steady, watching the lines blur under wipers. Then driftwood appeared across both lanes. I braked, gentle but firm. Bryce didn't. His coupe fish-tailed, clipped the guard, airbag blooming like a white mushroom. I stopped, hazard lights flashing. He was dazed but breathing. I dragged a fallen road cone to mark the curve, then leaned in his window. You only look big when everyone lets you, I said, and tapped his cheek twice. A second slap, soft but undeniable. I balanced the cone on his hood like a crown and took one short video. 3 seconds. Nothing cruel, just truth. Blue lights approached from behind. Another accident farther back. I left before the cops arrived. I hadn't broken a single law. Next morning, Lila stood at the gala planning meeting, eyes puffy. He's dangerous, she told the committee. He attacked Bryce. Perfect. She just handed me motive to act publicly, not secretly. Delia met me at the Pier Cafe. She wore the smirk of someone holding extra cards. I know you've been busy, she said. The wheel message, the drone fiasco, that perfect timing on the causeway. You're a storyteller, Ethan. Am I fired or famous? I asked. Depends. I could turn this into a feature. Small-town drama, betrayal, redemption, ratings gold. Her eyes were hungry. That's when I realized she'd been orchestrating things, nudging gossip, scheduling overlaps, whispering to Kendra. Not for me, for her segment. You've been filming us, I said. Public spaces, she replied. Everyone's fair game. She wanted a live fireworks night finale, a triangle imploding on camera. She'd get her ratings, but I'd control the sound. Give me a 7-minute slot, I said. Let me run the live audio. I'll make your story unforgettable. She hesitated, then grinned. Deal. That night, I wrote the rundown. Every mic, every cue, every feed routed through me. Lila and Bryce would think they were wired for a private stream to their followers. In reality, their mics would feed the pier loudspeakers. Consent existed. They'd signed Delia's release forms. Everything was legal and poetic. The boardwalk pulsed with bodies. Cotton candy smell, brass band warming up, sky bruised purple. Lila shimmered in sequins. Bryce wore his apology grin. Delia's crew tested cameras. I sat at the soundboard beneath the grandstand, hands steady, pulse slow. At 9:50, Delia's voice crackled in my headset. We're live in 30. Make it sparkle. The lovers leaned close on their pier stage, microphones live. Their voices poured into my console. Bryce. After this, we post the clip, disable comments, ride the sympathy wave. Lila. And we'll say he's unstable. Everyone already suspects. I faded the band down and pushed their channel up to full. Their own words blasted across the boardwalk speakers. The crowd turned. Gasps, phones lifted. Bryce froze, mouth open. Lila spun toward the sound booth like she'd seen a ghost. Delia mouthed, "Holy hell," behind her camera. Bryce stormed off the stage, shoving through the crowd toward me. He grabbed my collar, yanking me halfway over the console. You think this makes you a hero? He shouted. No, I said, breaking his grip. Just honest. I shoved him back. Not hard, just enough that he stumbled into the foam-padded arch from the children's obstacle course. He slipped, landed in a pool of pink confetti left from a promotion. The crowd laughed first, then clapped. I leaned over him. Touch me again, and those videos of you dangling and wearing a cone crown go viral. Your choice. Then, deliberate and theatrical, I slapped him once. The sound cracked like a starter pistol. Lila backed away, mascara streaking. The Sandbar 3 scrambled to distance themselves on camera, each blurting their own version of betrayal. Chaos rippled. Delia gestured frantically for more, but I pulled my headset off. Enough spectacle. Still, I wasn't done. One last act remained, the storm that had been stalking the horizon all night. Wind arrived first, snapping banners, rattling metal joints. Lightning lit the bay white. Bryce followed me onto the maintenance catwalk, soaked, shaking with rage. "You ruined my life," he yelled. "You built it on selfies," I said. "I just held up a mirror." We stood 20 feet above the black water. Below, the carnival light smeared across puddles. He swung again. I ducked, caught his wrist, and twisted just enough to drop the phone from his hand. It skittered across the metal and vanished into the dark. "You're not worth jail," I said. "Then what are you worth?" "Closure." I hit the radio cue. Down on the pier, Gus triggered the scheduled fireworks. The first explosion thundered overhead, echo rolling like an ocean wave. Bryce flinched backward, off balance. The safety net caught him again, same as before. Poetic repetition, bright confetti drifting down from the blasts above. I climbed down the ladder, rain blinding, crowd cheering for fireworks, not us. Bryce was tangled but safe, shouting threats no one heard. Lila stood by the barricade, drenched, watching sponsors walk away in silence. Her brand ended not with a scandal, but with laughter she couldn't control. I found the dropped key fob by the stairs, the one Bryce loved like a child. I clicked it until the coup's horn and lights flared below. Ridiculous in the storm. Then I tossed the fob into the confetti pool from earlier, still retrievable, just ruined for the night. Delia lifted her camera. "Say something," she called. I faced the lens, rain streaming off my chin. "I don't fold when shouted at," I said, and gave a 2-finger salute. Behind me, fireworks turned the sky white gold. The crowd roared, not knowing what story they'd just witnessed. I walked the length of the catwalk, wind clawing my jacket, thunder rolling like applause. Each step felt lighter. No redemption, no forgiveness, just the end of noise. The storm swallowed the last cheer as I disappeared into sparks and rain.